6:30, April 23rd, 2019. I call this meeting to order. Is there a motion to approve the April 9th, 2019 minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next item on the agenda is discussion items about the 2019-2020 county budget. Ms. Brock?
Good evening, gentlemen. I don't know if this one's on. Everybody hear me? In front of you, you will have a summary sheet that is multicolored. Looks kind of like this. It's 3 pages long. I got an extra copy coming on the way, actually. Since I'd missed the last budget committee meeting and understand there was no official action, there were some modifications based on the information that was provided to you on April the 2nd. Those are in the blue column. I wish we'd put this up on the screen, actually, but since we just finished it, that might have been difficult. To my understanding, on 4.9, there was discussion, but there were no significant or monetary changes made to the document or the figures for the departments or any of the funds. That's the lavender or purple column. And since that time, the white column, which would be the second from the right, would be the amendments that Ms. Price and I have been working on diligently throughout this day in conjunction with several of the members of our staff to present a balanced budget. This balanced budget does, however, reflect a tax increase for designated millage for the capital vehicle plan, which we will go over shortly. An additional 1.3 mills to be restored to the Economic Development Fund for the upgrades at the parks, the destination signage, gateway signage, additional land and upgrades at the Shaw Ram Park, accessibility features at some of our larger tourist attractions, as well as the economic development factor itself. The remainder of the balance, the 0.6 mil, was included in the general fund to create a balanced budget with a request for a 4% increase for staffing across the board, elected officials included. We've never included elected officials in our raises in the past. For each of the items in the white column, it is revenues on the first. You'll see the increases in revenues. That's reflected from the requested tax increase. And as it goes down, it shows you each of the changes that were made from the book that you were given on April 2nd. I don't know if you brought all of your books with you. That's included in your backup materials. We had done these summary sheets instead of making new sheets for the booklets to make it easier to understand for you and for the public. If you would like me to do a brief summary of how these changes came about, I would be happy to do that. If you'd like a moment to look over it, that's fine too.
Got a question.
Yes, sir.
You got $600,000 for some type of report for staffing?
Actually, Mr. Hart, is that under the administrator's office?
Yes, that's right.
It was $646,000, $649,795. That was originally included in the budget, and it was the implementation for wage increases based on the outcome of the staffing study. If you'll look on your summary sheet, the sheet here, sir,
Page 14 of 86 is what he's,
in the budget book.
in the
correct?
budget book. 649, 795 listed as professional staffing study implementation under administrator.
Correct. So if you'll go to that same item here on your summary sheet, about 3/4 down on the page, you'll see Administrators Department on page 1. You need an extra copy, Mr. Hart. I'm not sure if I left the correct one for you.
Come out on this one.
Yes,
This
sir.
is Administrator 717, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So if you'll go all the way across to where that white column is,
I
the
see it.
second column from the right, that is negating that number back out.
You're taking it out?
Of the administrator's office, yes, sir.
Okay.
So if you'll flip down, I'll tell you where I add that number back in. If you'll flip to page 3 on the summary sheet. Oh, I'm sorry, we've moved it. It's back on page 1, I'm so sorry. Right above where the administrator's office is on that same sheet, sir, you'll see $1.1 million.
Yeah.
That 643,000 was moved and that 1.1 added for a 4% requested increase across the board.
In other words, you're telling me this, 643,000 is part of this 1.1 million?
Yes, sir, that
Okay.
was the full intent of that, yes, sir.
Okay.
The reason that I've asked for the 4% across the board, monkey see, monkey do, was that I did happen to watch the School District of Oconee presentation for their annual budget request as well and noted their 4% across the board. After reviewing several of the calculated salaries in the Appalachian Council of Government Salary and Wage Comp and Study book compared with our salaries, we're very in line with what the starting salaries are for the positions that we have that are reflective in the other counties in the COG. One thing that happens in other counties that has not happened here is a substantial increase of 4%, which would make a starting salary for someone more appealing, knowing that they would get a 4% increase in a one-year period.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Do you want to go over line by line?
I'm sorry, sir.
Do you want to go over line by line?
If you would like me to,
On the counts of the 42319 column?
I would be happy to do that, sir.
Thank you, thank you.
So on the first item, the property tax is actually 0.6 of a mil. That was the amount needed to balance the budget with the expenditures for the general fund. That increase of 329 is based on a estimated millage at 548, 364. It's not an entire mill that would be going to county operations. It is a little over half of a mill that is required to balance the budget with the requested items that we have for the increases and the departmental costs. The intergovernmental, the 66,500, is the increase in our estimation for the local government fund. The interest and investment income increase of $100,000 is reflective of the interest that we have received to date and have every reason to believe that that number would be accurate for next year as well. Our total revenue increase is $495,518, making the total revenue for the running total $49,714,477. Going down to the expenditures division, you'll see the 4% salary increase request. That is $1.1 million, and that does include the fringe and benefits. The reduction of $643,295 is just as we had discussed, Mr. Hart, was for what I intended to be the staffing study implementation. After reviewing that staffing study from the COG, I determined that asking for an increase across the board may be more equitable for our employees. The additional $18,000 for the airport is for a rented or leased Jet A fuel truck. The purchase price of the Jet A fuel truck is in excess of $250,000. By us leasing this Jet A truck, one, we would not have to purchase it or pay depreciation over time. Two, the lease terms require that the company provide us with a 5 to 10-year-old truck at the same cost of $1,500 per month. If which is a significant savings annually comparative to purchasing a Jet A truck. The reduction of $60,000 at Shaw Ram Park is for a maintenance or utility shed that was proposed to be placed at the park. Because I've requested the millage be implemented back to the Economic Development Fund, in part for tourism and Gateway Oconee, Destination Oconee implementation, those funds have been allocated back to that designated millage so that that may be paid out of that. The county attorney's reduction of $15,000 is for the professional legal services line item. Mr. Root has done an incredible job at fiscal responsibility, and I believe that that amount would be decreased next year unless we see a lawsuit the size of the Pioneer lawsuit, in which case we would be discussing that with council anyway. On the second page, if you'll see the reduction of $27,500, that is removing the district gravel, which has been placed back into the administrator's account so that each of those items can come to council. The decrease at the detention center is in electricity and facilities maintenance. Because the electricity cost over the last 3 years, remember when we made the 3-year budget, the detention center was relatively new. The electricity cost on average for the last 3 years has been lower than anticipated. So there was a $13,000 reduction there and a $10,000 reduction in the maintenance on building and grounds. Facilities maintenance reduction of $2,187, is also for utilities at the DSS building, the DHEC building, and the probation and parole office. The increase for Health and Human Services is for the funding for direct aid, which in the past has been listed out individually in non-departmental. The direct aid in the past, we have had just a set amount that we would provide to each of the agencies. And I believe, and I don't know if it was a written policy, that we had some understanding that we would just write checks to agencies within the county. I believe at this point, those agencies should make annual requests and provide their previous year's audit for any request. That direct aid funding, in the event that we do have a large organization like we did a few weeks ago with the YMCA coming in and requesting the gravel, that direct aid increase would help cover those costs as well. The additional $50,000 in non-departmental is to help cover the cost. What are those called for probate? Notice to creditor.
Yes.
I've had some issues with what things are called in departments, I apologize. The increase for notice to creditors, they're required to run these ads and they have to be in print form. I believe it is 3 times. The cost for running those ads has increased. Now, our fees will reflect the increase for the notice to creditor increases. We've also increased the fees, so it will be a net zero. But we are spending more to place the ads in the first place, even though that the estate or person placing the ad is paying the county for them. The additional $87,500 in PRT is increased funding for each of the rec departments. That increased funding for the rec department districts is gone up to $30,000 per district. The decrease of $25,000 in the probate court office was the decrease in court expense because we no longer have 3 individual newspapers. We don't have to do the work to do the ads in 3 individual newspapers. They will not need that extra expense since the Daily Journal has purchased the Kiwi Courier and the Westminster News. The $5,000 reduction in the sheriff's office is for professional services. on page 3, if you'll see the total for the expenditures and reductions, that balance is $495,518. Again, making the expenditures balance with the revenues at $49,714,477. On the bottom of that page, you will note the 1.3 mills that I had discussed with you previously to be restored to the Economic Development Fund. 2 years ago, when we changed the percentages of the fee in lieu of agreement percentages that we would share with the school district, our share had increased, and we reduced the economic development millage from 2.1 to 1.1. This recommendation is to put the 1.3 increase in there to help cover the expenses of the park upgrades, the gateway signs, and the items that I had mentioned to you previously, because they are allowed to be expended from the Economic Development Fund. The Capital Vehicle Equipment Fund, excuse me, is requested that we put 2 mills in. In just a moment, we're going to switch gears and go over the capital vehicle replacement sheets. This is something that Mr. Beck has given me a crash course in. And I feel like once we get this fund established with the baseline of monetary funds that we have already designated in our capital projects fund, reallocated to begin our opening balance, so to speak, that this 2 mills on an annual basis would be almost adequate to work this plan for a 5-year period.
Any questions so far?
It's a lot, I understand.
I think one of the biggest things that we look at, you know, when we put in the salary increases last year for employees that we budgeted, and we knew moving forward we'd need to get them and continue to get them in line. And I, for one, continue to push forward to do that and budget properly for that moving forward. I'd love to see, even after this increase coming in there, that council continue to do 2% or something moving forward. You know, that'd be next year, not the budget we're working on now, but the following year's budget. That way we continually keep in line, because it is difficult to retain employees, and appreciate those that you know, continue to work with us. And I think, to me, I'm definitely on board with that 4% moving forward, and then continue to have some increases after that. So I appreciate council voting for that last year, and I support that wholeheartedly.
We're running $1.6 million more than we did last year. Where's the majority of that coming from? The raises at 1 million or 1 million?
The 1 million in raises, coupled with additional expenses in some of the departments. Most of our departments have done their best to maintain a dead level number, and they've done well. The 1.1 million is significant. Now, to balance the general government portion without the designation of the millage that I've requested, the 1.3 and the 2.0, technically your increase was only $329,018, just for the general government's part. The increase at looking at your capital vehicle replacement, it's enormous, Mr. Hart, and I know that y'all have had this before. I know that you sat in on those meetings last year, but last year we didn't address it. Year before we didn't address it. Once we do start going through these sheets, and I will get Ernie Beck up here because he's become a master at going through these sheets. If we don't start addressing the fact that we have 12 and 15-year-old vehicles without a plan, without replacing them, 2 mills will never be enough for us to catch up. If we keep letting it go, the further away it gets and the more money it's going to cost us to do anything about it.
Yes, I think we have to have a long-range view of this, and you know, have a cycle replacement, so that you cycle new equipment in every year but you don't do it all at one time. If we kick the ball down the field a little bit more, we're gonna have a huge expense in 1 year. And we're gonna not be able to service the county also.
So to answer your question very clearly, the increase in actual tax is $329,018 for the general fund. The increase in the requested mills, the mill being valued at $548,364. So technically, that would be 1.1 million for the capital vehicle replacement. And what was the 1.3? I've got a little chart here somewhere in my cheat sheet. It's $712,873. $712,873, my apologies. And that was for the implementation of dedicating a line item fund for the maintenance and upkeep of the sewer expansion, the $42,000 and the $17,000 that we've recently allocated for the sewer, for the grant for the extension of sewer. We're going to have to develop a maintenance account on that. The Economic Development Fund is also responsible for the matching portions on grants. I know that Salem had recently received word back on their grant. I don't know that Wahala had, but the economic development and the upgrading of the county facilities and our attractions is important. I don't know when the last time you were at a park, one of our county parks, but they're in desperate need of upgrade.
A follow-up question. You said that Salem had got their word on their grant. I
believe
asked
they
about
have.
that today, and I didn't get an answer.
Well, I talked with the mayor of Salem Monday, I believe, no, Friday, and they just got a letter back that the 2018 disaster grant fund was all gone, and so they did not get the grant.
Okay, that's the reason I asked. I didn't know it.
Are there other questions about the summary sheet for the budget changes that we have made from 4.2 to 4.9 to 4.23?
Amanda?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, sorry. The salary increases, I know that those are much needed. The 1.1 million. My question is, how will those be, is that gonna be flat across the board, 4%, or is that going to be staggered? You know, in the past, when we've done an increase, it's been, the percentage has been higher for those with a lower salary number or wage. How's that gonna be spread?
My recommendation is flat across the board, minus me as a contract employee.
Is the 1.1 a full year of that increase of 4%, or is that a half a year?
That is a full year.
Full year. So we'll be funding it, but when will the 4% go into effect?
My recommendation, July 1st.
So everybody who is a county employee, other than you being contract, would see a 4% increase on the first pay period following the next budget year. Is that correct? Okay, so it's not gonna be done over a annual, you know, in the past we've done, you know.
Normally, we do them on anniversary dates.
Yeah.
People in July 26th are pretty happy. People on June 7th are not. Across the board is across the board. Everybody gets it at one time. It's like dealing out the whole deck of cards.
I know the school district the state had mandated 4%. Do they do it starting July 1st also, or do they stagger
I actually
theirs?
have no idea how they do theirs.
Okay.
I would not mind asking that because I was curious myself.
Let's ask that question.
and I'm not trying to, this is just a big number, and it's recurring, and I just am, gonna ask a couple more questions.
Please do.
Why not focus the increases at the lower percentages, at the lower wage and salary numbers versus across the board to all employees?
I love the philosophy of it, I do. Looking at it on a scale, it's easy to say, well, someone that makes $27,000 should get a little bit more. Had we addressed raises and salary increases in the past across the board, I think it would have been different. But I think in the past 4 years, and I don't know if it's in our book because it's been quite that long, every county employee 5 years ago got $1,200 flat across the board. I believe you were on council, and I know Mr. McCall was as well. But I don't believe, other than this past year with the 1 to 3%, that any county employee's gotten an increase. So as much as I do want to do a graduated scale, no one was not given a raise on a graduated scale. You were either given some or none. And I think it's time to give all some.
And we did do a sliding, we did the 1, 2, 3 for that reason.
Right.
So it's
Correct.
kinda,
So last
you know,
year, this actual current
that
budget
low
year,
got
when
3.
you've got someone that is getting the 3%, July 1, when they get their 4%, it is on a sliding scale in a way because they get 7.
And
The impact to those lower salaries below the percentage marks, it is graduated based on the fact that we are piggybacking on the increases that were approved for this year on that sliding scale.
and this is your recommendation, so, and you're the administrator, so I respect your recommendation.
And I know that our staff is ready. And I know that the 1 to 3% was an incredible thing for a lot of people. 1 to 3% every 4 or 5 years is not incredible.
Right,
1 to 3% every 4 or 5 years is how we lose our employees.
sure. And I think just from my seat, it's important to be mindful that we focus our, use a market-based approach, and I'm not saying that people are marketable goods or anything like that. I'm just saying that the labor market is very competitive right now, and I understand that. And so we have to focus, in my opinion, it's important to focus on the jobs that we have high turnover in, and figuring out why we have high turnover in those departments or those positions, and also make sure that we're focusing pay increases on those where we're below market. Now, if you're saying we're below market across the board, or it's difficult to retain,
It's the
I'll buy that.
retention.
And so I'll go along with it, but I'm just, from my standpoint, want to make sure that we're focused on, once we get things, the ship righted, so to speak, that we focus more on, specific positions or departments, and making sure that those, I know CDL drivers are difficult to keep, and I know equipment operators are difficult to keep. So, hopefully this will address the turnover in the departments that we're having the turnover, because that's all I'm saying. I just want to, and I trust you, and I know you're mindful of
Another
that.
factor that I had considered with the July 1 implementation is the increased accountability. We are going to reinstate employee evaluations. In the past, evaluations were given on anniversary dates because raises were given on anniversary dates, and it was based on merit. In theory, that's a great thing, but when the merit raises went away, several years ago, we went to the 1,200, we kind of stopped doing those evaluations. We lost accountability. The standards have slipped a little. It's time to raise them back up. It's time to increase the accountability. And with that, you get the increased pay. And it would increase the responsibility that you have to your job, your supervisor, and to this county.
All right, that's definitely something that I was hoping you'd say. I'm glad to hear that.
Y'all will be doing my evaluation.
I'm a firm believer in evaluations and doing it all at the same time. I think that's a super idea.
And I think in the past, that was one of the reasons why the raises being on anniversary dates was first implemented, and there's a cost savings to it. But I promise you, the person on June 7th is not that happy. They get 3 weeks of their raise. I mean, if they do get it for the next fiscal year, but if there is no raise for the next fiscal year, they got 11 months without it. I think the implementation on July 1st would again, highlight the commitments y'all have made this fiscal year. Piggybacking on the 1 to 3% is a wonderful thing for a lot of the employees that are making in that mid-range or low-range salary.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments before we move to the capital replacement plan? Brock?
I'd be happy to address any other questions, even one-on-one beyond this, or if y'all want to email me, then I'll be happy to print them out and we can provide them at the next meeting. I'd like for this to be as open as possible. I know this is a giant budget and these are big numbers. I'd like to tell you that you get desensitized to them, but you don't. It is a huge number, and I understand that. I also understand the responsibility I'm placing on you by requesting you to give me more money. But if we're going to fix the things that we have not fixed for a long period of time, a lot of these are absolutely necessary. Making the impacts and positive changes to our environment, asking employees to step up with more accountability, I think you're going to get your money's worth sooner or later. I really do.
Well, and, you know, if our tax revenues do not increase at the same rate as the market, what the cost of goods are and what the cost of labor is and all these other things, we have no choice. We can't stand idly by out of principle and say, this is unnecessary, because it's becoming more and more necessary every day that we don't address it.
It is.
And, you know, I think in order to be good, smart fiscal, to put together a good fiscal plan, you know, specifically making sure that we don't lose experienced employees, because that's a very costly number when you're training new employees. They're not productive, and whoever's training them is not productive. And anybody who's owned a business knows it's very expensive to train employees, because you're having to take someone who can do their job off of their job to train somebody who can't do their job. So you have two people not doing their job, basically. And, you know, so it's important. It sounds like we're being, you know, people might say we're being wasteful, but I think we're being wiser and more conservative in making sure we keep our key people, and don't have to keep retraining new ones who then take a job 6 months or a year later somewhere making a little bit more money. So I agree with it, and I think what you're about to present on this capital vehicle replacement thing is smart from a fiscal, to be conservative with the county's money. This is what we need to do.
And I do believe that the designation of millage for the capital vehicle replacement and for the upgrades that the facilities do require, the designation of millage by putting this bank aside in the event that there is a year where the expenses are a little more than the last year, or something comes up unexpectedly, it's not like we're gonna have to sit here and find the money. By having this in a designated account, it gives you a sort of even keel. And you may not always spend the money, just like we don't always this past 2 years with the Road and Bridges Maintenance Fund because of the weather. But on that third year, when those things fix themselves because everything is cycled, you'll have that money there, and you won't have to say, okay, now we need to do this. Now, you know, as long as you have a plan, like you said, sir, I mean, what is it they say? Plan to fail or fail to plan? If you have that plan and you absolutely stick to it, it's a no-fail. I honestly believe that with the designation of millage for economic development and the gateways. And now we're ready to move on to capital vehicles.
Yes.
Everyone? Yes. And we'll take 1 second because I believe we ran out of copies. Mr. Mangum, did you get one? Really? Thank you. All right, Mr. Beck, you want to come sit with me? So on the simplified sheet in front of you, it said actually it's 3 pages. You got one with a lot of stuff on it, and you've got one with bigger stuff on it. Let's go to the bigger stuff one first, okay? Am I starting with me? So I called Ernie crying after he gave me this piece of paper because it's a lot of money on here too. And then he said, they're there, and then we worked through it. That's where the 2 mills came up. And actually, it's nothing to cry about. We actually can form a plan from this. It's a terrifying thing to start. But again, once we do start, I think we're gonna be okay getting moving forward. Mr. Beck has painstakingly gone through all 726 pieces of equipment and vehicles this county operates and owns. The list in front of you is what should be funded the very first year. Liddell and I have worked very hard to find, figure, twist. We literally heard Penny scream in my office at some point. So I'm gonna let Ernie walk you through this list, and then we'll walk you through the funding part of it once you understand the list itself. How's that?
Good afternoon, council. So the list you see before you is what is recommended by administration this year, based on the calculations that we have come with in the 4-year capital replacement that I have included with you this evening. The first section you'll see of the Sheriff's Department, the first one in green is going to be transferred from the Sheriff's Department into the library system as a courier van. We felt that that little minivan was more suited to go in a department that could use it instead of trying to haul 8 inmates in a 4-passenger van. They're going to be utilizing it in a much better manner. The next group of vehicles you see are the sheriff replacements for this fiscal year. In the past, we have tried to maintain a estimated number due to building our fleet. It's been difficult, but we've narrowed it down to this amount of vehicles, and we feel that this is the least amount of vehicles we can do with the replacement schedule we have before us. And the last line there is I wanted to break apart, instead of a vehicle being a certain dollar amount and then add equipment to it, we have that you can see actually what is allotted for the equipment, the lights, the siren, striping of those vehicles. It's not built into the price of each vehicle. You can actually see what it costs. Okay. Going to page 2, we have the first one is the Dodge Caravan coming from the detention center to the library. The second vehicle for facility maintenance would be to replace a 2004 Malibu. They have better use of a truck instead of a car, naturally, to throw trash bags, vacuum cleaners, mop buckets. They can put those in the back of a truck instead of a car. That truck would come from vehicle maintenance. That current truck is a 1500 four-wheel drive pickup. It has been hauling a 10,000-pound trailer and bringing things back from Columbia State Surplus. We have struggled using a 1500 truck with that size trailer. We need to add that to a 2500 truck. Okay. In lieu of replacing the Malibu, facility maintenance can use that truck. Solid waste. I don't know if we all remember 5 years ago there was a fire at the landfill. Traco burned up. Since then, we have been making do with the old Cabelco that Roads and Bridges retired many years ago. It has now become unsafe. If you want number one on my top priority list, that is it. We have pieced it together the best we can. So we have that, as well as a roll-off truck. Hauls the cans back and forth to the convenience center. The newest truck we have, I believe, not having the paperwork in front of me, is a 2013. Amanda touched on the airport. The airport is the main purpose of looking at leasing a Jet A truck. Number one is you have a newer truck. We have a 97 GMC. The truck doesn't have any miles on it. However, the problem is that we all know while that truck is pumping fuel, it must be running. You have wear and tear on engine, transmission, even though the miles aren't there. Then also, we're going to move from 1,100 gallons of fuel to 5,000 gallons of fuel, which is a significant number because we don't necessarily have to increase the fuel farm at this time. We can keep extra fuel on the field for holidays, ball games, that sort of thing. There's also a Kubota front cut mower on there at $25,000, and I don't know, I've got it wrote in on mine. I don't know if you can see it. Okay, yeah, they don't have it on
We
there.
didn't
All
have
right.
the changes.
So there is a change to airport. Right now, they have a Skag 72-inch front cut, zero turn. It is gas. It has a lot of wear and tear on it. It has been consistently mowing, I believe, for 8 years. It is reaching the end of its life. We are going to switch and go to a larger Kubota with a diesel engine to help save fuel prices. As well as you all know, Kubota makes a wonderful piece of equipment. We have several in the county, and parts are available right here in the county. That's another thing. The Skag, the parts have disappeared out of the county. We are going to easily, and sometimes the Greenville purchase parts. So that's in there as well. And that about sums it up for this year. If you notice, and you go over to the vehicle capital replacement, I put together a 4-year program for you. I know past years we have not been able to properly fund our capital vehicle replacement. That is snowballing on us. And I think administration has done a good job this year. We've put a lot of numbers together, and I think we are on the right track to having a good program. Feel free to look through the numbers. You will see several highlighted numbers in there. There's also the green, which is usable at the end. If, and just gives you an example, if you were to fund the whole vehicle replacement plan each year, you can see the numbers at the end. There's $4 million, $3.7 million, $2.7 million, and $3.7 million. So our request for
2.0 mils.
2.0 mils is quite a bit of difference. I've worked with Amanda. We have narrowed this list down and narrowed it down and narrowed it down. I feel at this time, I'm bringing you rock bottom. We need to have vehicles and equipment out there that is safe for these county employees to operate. And we definitely don't want the liability of faulty equipment. Not that we can't keep a lot of things running, but we need to keep it safe for pursuit applications as well. I'll feel free to answer any questions you may have.
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Why, two? On the Trico that burned up at the landfill, what happened to the insurance money we got from that equipment when it burned up?
The funding from any insurance proceeds is in the capital projects fund, and they're all in designated funds at this time. A part of the funding for the request to designate millage annually is to take the future acquisitions from the insurance proceeds that we have received back from accidents or faulty equipment, and the solid waste equipment replacement, which is in the capital projects fund. I don't believe you have this with you, but this is part of our annual pre-budget workshop, is to take the balances from those two things to put again as our beginning balance in this fund moving forward.
The other question is, this may be outdated. The last year's budget, we voted, because they had to have a fire truck right now, an extra fire truck, and the last thing I heard, we ain't even bought it yet.
At this moment in time, I know that there was a used ladder truck purchased, and they are right now in the process of purchasing the other fire trucks. That is correct. I believe we're trying to get RFP or get with procurement to get that process started. I know Chief King has met with myself as well as those fire chiefs, and we've already done a pre-build plan meeting. So that process of last year fire trucks are in the process, but they have not been completed.
Which is why, Mr. McCall, and I think that's a great question. If y'all look on page 1 of this, you'll see 3 areas here on the front page, about halfway down, that are highlighted in bright yellow. It takes almost 6 to 8 months for us to order and procure a fire truck, knowing that the fire truck that we have approved for this year's budget has not yet been purchased. We bumped the purchase of a fire truck. Now this plan, I should state, frank and open and clear, does not include any fire service other than this summary sheet for the first year. Chief King has his own capital replacement equipment that we're going to have to look at some point.
But we
But-
set, we
Yes, sir, I'm
set
sorry.
the money aside last year,
Yes, sir.
and it was not spent
Yes, sir.
until this year.
I believe the process of ordering and obtaining a fire truck is a little more difficult than I knew about.
Well, they didn't even, last, you and I talked, they hadn't even issued the request for, purchase.
And I don't know if that, and I know you had said that you'd spoken with Trina, I don't know how they spec them out for individual trucks. I know I have looked at specs for trucks before, but if they had a specific need for this request for this specific truck, I was unaware of it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, and I think I agree with what you're saying, but if it doesn't get spent, it should go into a holding, as I've seen several times before, where, we're still within the year, obviously, but it may not be until September, October before that comes across council as budgeted. But
absolutely.
we don't spend the money. I think that's the important thing that you're bringing up is we don't spend the money that we have designated for a fire truck. And I know we're still doing the same thing on the magistrate stuff is we budgeted for it. We haven't built it yet for a multitude of reasons. But I think that's the main thing here is that money doesn't get spent somewhere else. And I think y'all are doing a phenomenal job. And I know vehicle maintenance is making sure that, hey, you know what the money's for.
Correct. And by making the millage designated for this specific fund or for this specific purpose would way decrease the ability for that money to be reallocated for anything other than another vehicle. That particular fire truck, I believe, did come out of the 10 fund, am I right, Adele?
Came out
So
of what?
knowing that particular fire truck that Mr. McCall is asking about was designated to come out of the 10 fund. Well, the 10 fund is where expenditures of multitude of nature can be made. Designation of millage for only vehicle replacement would reduce the risk of having those funds reallocated in a different budget year.
So it makes sure, or does as good a job as this council can do to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible with a plan going forward, even if other people want to use that money for other things.
Correct. Having this designation, now, another sitting council could, of course, undesignate
Sure.
it, but it would be 3 readings and a public hearing as well, and much to our unhappiness, seeing as the amount of time and energy that Mr. Beck and I have placed into this. The 4-year schedule in front of us, and Mr. Beck, I promise y'all, is a very patient man, because I want to know what everything is and what it does. And I know that y'all heard me say, what, SCAG? Okay, whoever named that. But yes, sir, it does limit the ability for any other purchases to be made when they were intended to be made for vehicle purchases or equipment.
Well, every year I've been here, we've continually talked about fixing it, and we talked about it last year. That was one of the things that we brought up, and then didn't do it last year. So I'm in support of this because we have to. Wheels are coming off. We're
Literally.
paying for just the maintenance of some of these equipment, just to have them getting to and from. And so, you know, I think, you know, as we move forward, it's using things properly. Fortunately, vehicles is not the, you know, most wonderful thing in the world to go spend money on, but it's a have to have. You know, think about it in your place when your vehicle doesn't work. Fortunately, we got a great motor pool that does a phenomenal job at keeping things on the road, but, you know, when it doesn't work, what got missed? Work got missed. People got missed.
And if you look
and-
at this list, more often than not, citizen services get missed.
Well, we're demanding a lot from everybody. We're demanding a lot from elected officials, we're demanding a lot from administrator, we're demanding a lot of our employees, and we're demanding a lot for our vehicles. We can't ignore these things anymore. And so, you know, like I said, unfortunately, it's not glorious to go spend money on this stuff, but, you know, it's something that we have to do. The can is, I said it last year, is smashed in the road. And, you know, we picked it up and recycled it, of course, but,
And the total for this particular year's funding request is a little over the 2 mills, but between Liddell and I, we have been able to reduce that. One, by requesting the reallocation of the funding that was already in the capital projects fund for the insurance replacement and for the solid waste equipment, since solid waste is on this list as well. Two is that we felt like we could find somewhere between $275,000 and $325,000 from this year. Mr. Elliott, this goes against the principle of putting some of that into the fund balance. I believe at this point we will have more than that in excess, and we may be making equal shares, a designation back to the fund balance. But I think in order to get this plan off the ground and running, so that we prove to ourselves that it's successful, so once you see something work, then you believe it does work, right? We'll have to see this work. Putting money in a fund and not seeing anything for a long time, it reduces your belief that it will work, but this will work. So us finding this additional money from this year to allocate to help create that balance will help us keep within that 2 mil. There won't be any other increases needed. And for the larger sheet that Ernie had given you with the 4 years, there'll be a couple of things we'll move back 1 year and move forward 1 year to try to keep it more even keeled. Now, he's made his spreadsheet strictly on a replacement value, where we'll go in financially and look at it and see what's going to be more even keeled, so the increases won't be necessary time and time and time again. This is hopefully the biggest bullet you're going to have to bite when it comes to addressing this. But I think at some point, once we get to a midpoint, everybody is going to say, wow, it worked, and it's fixed. It's fixed. Something that's been broken for a long time is fixed.
Has Oconee County ever had a replacement plan?
Yes, sir, we've had about 500 of them.
Have we ever had one that was adhered to?
For a year or two here and there, yes, sir.
Okay.
We've never had a designated account and an adopted plan. And of course, you know, this plan, the larger picture, the 4 years, there are going to be things that are in that 4th year that we're going to replace next year. Things happen. So I don't want you to worry about too much that plan itself, but looking at the fact that there needs to be a plan, yes. Mr. Mulder had done a capital vehicle replacement plan when he first came. It was implemented for a few years, but then the funding goes away without the designated millage, and you have to come and request that every single year. It's an easy place to cut because it's not glamorous money to spend. By having it designated, you take the glamour out of it.
Any other discussion?
I just have one thing I would like to add to this, since we're still discussing this. I said this on April the 2nd, and I'd like to take back all of those words, because I said that we could change, that I thought that maybe we could change the language in the Road and Bridge Maintenance Fund for the ability to purchase equipment and/or trucks that were dedicated only to maintenance on roads and bridges. After this past weekend, I would like to eat those words. We will keep all the money for the maintenance of roads and bridges.
It won't be the last flood.
I'll eat those words too then. I honestly think we should keep that designated for repairs. After I saw what I saw this past weekend, in just one day, a significant amount of money can be expended on it. I don't think that we should worry about purchasing vehicles out of that fund. I think they need to stay in this fund as requested.
Any other business before we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Oh, motion to David to come.
For clarity purposes, Mr. Chairman, I know we're scheduled to meet on May 7th, another committee, Budget Committee meeting right before second reading. And I don't know if you want to do this, but this, just for clarity of transparency and clarity of the ordinance, what you can do, obviously, you can make a motion out of committee like any of the other committees can do and send it to the full commission, or full council, rather. So if you wanted to make a motion from the Budget Committee to adopt and recommend to full council what's on this document titled Fiscal Year 1920 Budget Changes.
Mr. Root, I'm so sorry. I've got one more sheet I failed to address before y'all make that motion.
Okay, this is just a housekeeping
Okay,
thing, but
thank you,
just
I'm
for
sorry.
consideration, if you do that, it's not binding on council, y'all can still do whatever you want to on second reading, but then we can prepare a proposed amended budget that has all the new numbers, that has the language I'll need to put in for the new fund, and then you'll have that as a backup document. So if you want to adopt that in full, you can. If you want to tweak it some more, it'd be clear. So,
I'll rescind my adjournment.
sorry,
Ms. Brock, you had one more thing?
I do have one more thing. Apparently, when I hit print, I did not print all of the document, and I have 3 additional items. I'll make copies of this if you would like it, and of course, I'll give one to Katie for the backup. These are minor changes made. It would go in summary. This would have been the final page to your budget summary. They are minor. One of the changes recommended is a communication tower maintenance fee for the planning department. We're requesting that we remove the word maintenance. It is an annual communication tower fee. We don't actually do the maintenance on them. Why we had the word maintenance in there was unclear to us, so we would like to remove that because it implies that we know how to do maintenance on communication towers, and we don't.
Is that our communication tower or what?
It is not. It's the fees for the planning department to do reviews for communication towers. They're not our towers. It's like if a carrier wanted to build a tower or add to a tower or upgrade a tower, it's a fee that's in our fee schedule through the planning department for review. The word maintenance was included on there, and it's not something that we would do through the
Is
planning
this just for
department.
building the tower or what?
It's for the review of the process for the tower itself. You know, they do the study to see it the fall or whatnot. But the word maintenance was in that fee, and we do not provide maintenance for outside communication towers.
I think planning needs to check with the FCC before we step on their toes.
This is simply just removing the word maintenance because we do not perform maintenance. I hope they go through the FCC if necessary for the approval and plan review of towers, but that's not included in the fee schedule. This is just this language that is included in the schedule.
So you're not changing the fee, you're just changing
No, sir,
the
just
wording?
the wording itself.
So that would need to be motioned during standard session.
That's just a portion of the changes to the budget. This would have been page
gotcha.
4 on your document, but because it was not monetarily related, we did not want to include it on the money pages. And when I printed it, I failed to print page 4. I will provide copies of these to you and to the press or public if y'all prefer. The second item there was the notice to creditor, which is also on the fee schedule. Remember, Mr. Hard, I told you about the increase for the notice to creditor ads for probate court. We need to increase the fee amount from $100 to $225.
And we get reimbursed for that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It will be a net zero. But because we have to pay additional for the advertisements for the notice to creditors, which have to run 3 times, we increase the fees that the estates pay to the court. And the third item there is language inclusive for the rock quarry and rock quarry only, that the quarry manager may substitute one product close in scale for another product due to availability. We've had instances where we've had contractors come in and want a certain type of rock or gravel, and we do not have it. It should be up to the quarry manager to offer that replacement without having to deny that customer stone.
Great idea.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to refer to council that we accept the proposed amendments as stated of 42319 as stated in here, as well as the amendments stated by Ms. Brock.
Second.
Any discussion?
Ms. Brock, you'll have all those amendments and all that stuff that you just stated? Okay.
We'll have all of the items that we have presented to you today in new budget books with the date of the next meeting. This is rather impromptu, but is it possible that I could request a budget workshop meeting some point before the 5-7 meeting so that we all may sit down and review one more time before we go into second reading?
Yes.
I realize that it's short, but only having a budget meeting to address the items that we addressed today to make sure all the i's are dotted and the t's are crossed and everybody understands the document that they are approving. Maybe 35, 45 minutes to an hour. I wouldn't think it would be longer than that, provided that you reviewed the document when we sent it to you and we could just have a brief discussion on what those changes were.
Do we need to discuss this particular thing before we vote on the reference to council? Or should we go ahead and, this doesn't sound like it's in the line with the subject matter of the motion.
Right, procedurally, if you're gonna send it to council and then you're gonna have another meeting, then I would hold off on the motion. You can firm it down, but if you're not gonna have this, another workshop in between, then I'd continue on with the motion so we have it to council. Because essentially, if you refer it to council now, it's outside of the committee.
That
Committees
was
can
why I brought
do-
it up now.
Okay,
I didn't
okay.
mean to
I'm just
butt
making
in
sure.
there, but before it was made the motion, I was just wondering if we could have that workshop. And if you wanted to go ahead with the motion, contingent on having a workshop.
I'll defer to our expert in parliamentary procedure on this.
It's almost a formality, but if you do make the motion, and you can make it contingent. Mr. Davis's motion could be to refer to council for consideration, full council for consideration, the proposed changes to the budget as contained on the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget changes worksheet, all 4 pages, and perhaps you could sign it and date it, Mr. Chairman, contingent upon no workshop being had. So if you have a workshop, that motion essentially voids itself, and so y'all could debate, change, whatever. So, but if you don't have a workshop, then it goes to council.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, the question to poll is, does council want to have another workshop?
I'm fine to do that if the administrator
If
would
you're all
like us to do
comfortable
that.
with the information provided to you and you feel like it is in a cohesive form so the public understands and that you could explain this document to the public should you be questioned on it, I'm perfectly fine with it. I feel like in some ways, and I said I felt desensitized, but once you work on this for like 27,000 hours, it becomes a second nature to you, and I don't want to feel like that I skimmed over anything without having to have a moment with you being able to reflect and ask questions should you wish.
I mean, it's in just a few line items here where what's happening.
Mr. Root and Ms.
Or
Price
what
have
is
worked
proposed to happen.
very well making this simple, because I am not a simple person. I know that you saw the train wreck in my office. If everyone's comfortable with the way this was presented, we can certainly create the new budget books, have them to you prior to the 5/7 second reading, and if there are any questions prior to then, we'll address them at that meeting before second reading.
Mr. Chairman, you think the budget books would be prepared by Friday, Monday? Friday would be the 26th or the 29th?
Yes, sir.
I'm good with the changes.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job explaining what this is, and, you know, there's a couple of lines here that are, I mean, it's really a few lines that really affect the budget.
Salary and vehicle replacement.
Salary, vehicle replacement, and the economic development fund.
And it's true, those are the major things.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why we didn't get the book out and go line by line. There's not a whole lot more we can do with the book. There's not a whole lot more we can cut from departments. There's just not a whole lot more we can do with the book. The changes that are presented here are the changes that are necessary to get us turned a little bit more rightward and start on our merry way of making this a merry place.
Well, there's a motion on the table.
Did I second that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
If everybody's comfortable with not having another budget meeting, then I'll call for the vote.
All in favor of having a workshop?
No.
No.
All in favor of the
Of
changes as
reference.
presented?
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Just to clarify on that, the motion was to refer to full council for consideration on second reading what is contained within the spreadsheet given to you, the budget changes, correct?
With the amendments.
With the fourth page included.
Yes, sir.
And if, like I said, if Mr. Elliott, if you could just sign that and date it so we could put that with the minutes in the record, that'd be good for chain of custody, so to speak.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.